Why the name Better Together Tuesdays? We came across a quote from Shelley Seifert, the chairman and CEO of First Bank in St. Louis, where she said, "Surviving and thriving in a crisis is rarely a solo event." So we believe we're better together. We're going to take this webinar and divide it into 3 unequal segments. There's focus, innovate, and engage. So we're going to start right off with the focus portion, and that's where most of our time will be spent, but then we'll give you some more information on those other 2 segments. But we're going to get started by introducing the topic today. The topic is about the PPP Loan Forgiveness. And I have a poll that I'm going to start and you're going to take it while I'm introducing our guests. I'll admit this is the first time I've used a poll on here, so I'm hoping that with the press of a button, that poll will begin. All right, launch poll. So I have 3 guests with me today. The first is Delia Marin, and she's my co-host today. Delia is a business development consultant for both the Missouri SBDC and PTAC, which stands for Procurement Technical Assistance Center. Her clientele extends far beyond the Kansas City area, and she'll be asking some questions alongside of me, the kind that she receives from her clientele, which might be a little different from mine. So welcome, Delia.
Hi, everyone. Welcome.
And then we have the Rebecca Squared. We have 2 Rebeccas with us, Rebecca Labina, and Rebecca Goebbels. Rebecca Labina is the Regional Director for the Northwest Missouri SBDC located in St. Joseph. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And finally, Rebecca Goebbels, who is no stranger to this webinar. This Rebecca is a business and program development consultant with the Missouri SBDC at UMKC. Welcome, this Rebecca.
Glad to be here.
All right, and we have our poll results. And here's what we've got right now. And I'll be honest, this is a little better than I anticipated. I thought I'd have some people in that first category here, but it looks like most of you plan to get 75% or greater forgiven of the PPP, and some of you have 100% planned on. So good to hear that. Good to hear that. We'll be talking a little bit about it. You know, it was just a few weeks ago in DC that we got handed down to us the EIDL program, the EIDL program, and then shortly thereafter the CARES Act, which included the Payroll Protection Program, or what we call the PPP. It's all implemented by the Small Business Administration. And all 4 of us, excuse me, on this webinar today can attest that immediately we were overwhelmed by calls for assistance from small business owners who were trying to understand the program, trying to apply for it, trying to navigate all that went into it. And so many of them felt very overwhelmed, confused, and uncertain about those loans. Many of them still feel overwhelmed, confused, and uncertain about those loans. And we understand that because we have too at times felt confused, overwhelmed, and uncertain about these loans, because it kind of has felt like a moving target with things changing and guidelines coming down late in the process. So we want to help you with as much information as we have today, help you figure out how to navigate this and what forgiveness looks like. So we've collected some questions, and hopefully if you're one of those that lucky business to receive a Paycheck Protection Program loan, or PPP, you have 8 weeks now to use those funds appropriately and meet the criteria for loan forgiveness or face repayment. Sounds ominous, doesn't it? So let's talk. Let's talk. Yeah, okay, so here's the first question. I'm going to throw this out to Rebecca Labina. I got my PPP loan, but what if I can't use the entire amount for payroll?
So 25% of the PPP can be used also for utilities, rent, and business mortgage interest. Not the principal, but the interest. So you can use a portion of it for that. Again, no more than 25%. Or if you need to, at the end, if you haven't used all of it, you can just give it back to the bank, the portion that you didn't use.
And if you do that, will there still be interest to pay on that?
Yes, there's still interest, begins the day that you receive the funds, and it's a 1% interest rate. But according to the, not the frequently asked questions, but one of the guidances that just came out on May 8th, I believe it was. There was one on May 6th and there was guidance on May 8th separately. And it said that the principal and interest would be forgiven.
Okay. All right, good to know. Rebecca, do you have any follow-up on that? Rebecca Goebbels?
Sounds good. That's
All
right.
Delia and I are going to kind of tag team today. And so, Delia, what questions do you have?
Well, I have a client who received the EIDL advance, and is that included in the PPP forgiveness amount?
Yeah, so the EIDL advance, despite having been discussed largely as not needing to be paid back in any way, if you also receive a PPP loan, that EIDL advance amount must be wrapped in to the PPP loan, and that EIDL advance amount does not count towards forgiveness.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so it's a little bit like, you don't have to pay it back unless you got help twice and then you 100% have to pay it back, is kind of how that works.
So it can only be counted once, so to speak.
One time.
Yeah, no double dipping, I guess is how they would say it.
Okay.
Yes, we should always look to Rebecca Labina for a much nicer way to say the thing.
No double dips. Got it.
So when does interest start if I got a PPP loan? Is it right now, or is it after the 6 months of no repayment, no payment? How does that work? Rebecca Labina.
My understanding is that it begins the day that the funds are dispersed. From that day forward, you will accrue 1% interest on the full amount.
Yeah.
But there's no payment due for 6 months, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay.
And it's a 2-year term.
So can you tell us what the payroll includes? Does that include the taxes, the benefits? What part is included in the payroll?
So with that includes like actual like W-2 wages. It includes, it excludes your FICA and Medicare taxes. You can include health benefits. You can include retirement benefits. Hold on, there was another one in there. Workers' comp you can include. Oh, there was like another one that's like a random one.
The state taxes you can include too.
Yes. Oh man, there was like a good one. It'll hit me and I will tell you. But there, I swear, is an extra random, like, good one in there.
What about like a bonus? If you're paying out bonuses, is that considered payroll?
Paid time off and sick leave. Those were the ones I was thinking about, because even though those are not cash outlays necessarily, unless people are using them at the time, the amount that you would be dispersing towards PTO and sick time also counts.
And just to add to that, if someone does actually take sick time, you cannot, again, double dip. So you can't use the tax credit program and receive tax credits for the sick time that you paid them if you have during the time that you're using PPP funds.
Okay, good to know.
Okay.
So, Delia, go ahead. Do you have a question?
So I was just, if we know that it cannot go beyond the 100,000 per employee, correct? So what about the benefits? What about what you just mentioned that's included in their payroll? How much of that may extend beyond that 100,000?
So the $100,000 is for the cash wages paid. That's the limit on what you can count for the PPP. But whatever amount that you pay that individual for their pension and health insurance and stuff, you take that full amount above the $100 mark. You just can't utilize their wages above 100,000.
Got it.
So what would you say is definitely not a forgivable use of funds?
Going to Barbados. First of all, what flight would you get on? I don't even think that's a thing again yet. But you need to use the funds for the things that the funds are for. It's for payroll. And so, you know, this whole, oh, well, I got this PPP money and can I refinance this other debt that I have? No, absolutely no debt refinance. The whole point is to give your business these funds at an attractive rate to try and keep people off unemployment, right? And so then the goal of what you need to be doing with the money is paying the people so that they can have real jobs and wages from your company.
And you absolutely cannot use it for back pay. So for wages that the business has already paid to the employees, you can't pay yourself, your business back for that. So no back pay.
So the 8 weeks start when you get the money. So it's all looking.
Yes.
All going forward. Okay.
And there's a hitch in the works right now, because presently it says 8 consecutive weeks from the time you get disbursement up until June 30th. And if you're just getting your money this week, that's not 8 weeks. Now, do I think that they will probably figure that out and change the guidance and fix that? Yeah, but that is not presently fixed. And so depending on when they fix it, you may need to consider forward-looking bonus structure or raises or those kinds of things, which are presently allowed.
Okay.
I would,
oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
I would add to the, just a note, if you use bonus as the classification, it might, your employees might actually incur more taxes on their end for a bonus. But if you classify it as hazard pay because they worked during the pandemic or just because you were paying them during the pandemic, there's no additional taxes to my knowledge for hazard pay.
Oh, that's really good advice. I haven't heard that.
Yeah, that is great. So what if a business owner had to take out of their personal savings in order to pay, help with the payroll? Are they able to pay themselves back?
I mean, it's the same as giving yourself a raise, right? Assuming that you receive W-2 wages from your company, right? If you're on some, profits at the end of the year is how they calculated your thing on the front end, I'd be careful with that.
So there's been a lot of questions to banks. In fact, I asked a number of banks to come on this webinar, and many were a little uncomfortable talking about it, right? Because they don't feel like enough guidelines have been handed down to them. So that brings the question of who's going to determine and how are they going to determine what is forgivable when the time comes?
So I'll let Rebecca talk about, the other Rebecca talk about that as well. But the part that I do know on that is that it is supposed to be up to the banks on forgiving the loan. The documentation will be turned into the banks for forgiveness of the loan. However, banks are seeking guidance from the SBA on what they really want to see as far as documentation, as well as how they want them to calculate the forgiveness definitively. And so my understanding is that according to NAGL, the National Association of Government Lenders, they are supposed to, they being the SBA, are guidance later this week on just that specific part about the loan forgiveness.
Okay, Rebecca Goebbels?
General gist is, at the end of the day, the bank is deciding what about your loan is getting forgiven. And they're doing the best they can based on the limited information that they have about how this is supposed to work. So one of the things I'm going to highly recommend is that as we're trying to figure this out, that everyone start preparing what I'm calling a forgiveness narrative, which is, this is what I spent the funds on. This is why I view it as payroll. This is my understanding of the thing. These are the other challenges that I was going through at the time. Here's any additional information I think could influence you as you're making these decisions, right? And so that's something that you're going to want to be creating and thinking through now, because this, I feel quite confident, will not be forgiven the same bank to bank to bank.
Yeah, so document, document, document.
We're going to talk a little bit more about document here in a minute, so keep that in your cap there. One of the things that I forget who it was said, I've talked to so many different people throughout this, in regards to using these funds is don't get tricky. Good advice. So it's like, if you feel like, oh, I'm trying to like really find this loophole in the law, and that's called getting tricky, and that's going to raise red flags in any kind of situation, whether that's from the bank or the IRS. So just wanted to throw in that bit of advice as you're spending this money. Don't try to be tricky about it.
Go
ahead.
And don't let the forgiveness tail wag the dog, right? Like, oh my gosh, I got this money and now I'm doing every single thing I can possibly to get this money forgiven, which, don't get me wrong, that's a wonderful goal. But this money is intended to keep people in jobs and your business moving forwards. That's job number one. Then how can I reduce the amount that I owe and reduce my financing costs? But that's number two. And I fear that some of the folks that I speak to have raised that to issue number one. And I'm like, can you even run the business anymore? Well, that's not an answer to the very specific forgiveness question I asked you. What the hell, man? How do you make money? So just try to really know that this is important, and I don't want to diminish it, but the number one thing all of our entrepreneurs need to be focused on is their long-term ability to survive.
Agreed. Very good.
Mhm.
Elliot, do you have another question?
Are PPP expenses, are they tax deductible?
The IRS has changed the rule on this. So originally, whatever you did for PPP forgiveness was just a regular expense and needed to show up on your tax return, and on down the road you go. People are, I think hostile is the word that I will choose, because the rule as it stands now is that any payroll, any expenses that you use towards PPP loan forgiveness are no longer tax deductible. And for some businesses, that won't be a big deal, but for other businesses, that will be a complete rug pulled out from under the way that they do business. And so just want to let you know that that came through, I think, what is today, Tuesday? I think I read about that on Sunday.
I just posted an article to chat in Entrepreneur that describes that and gives the IRS notice number. But remember, if your PPP is only for 2 months, then that's just 2 months of those expenses that you can't deduct. So it would be any rent or mortgage or salaries, but it's not your whole year. It's just those expenses that were covered by the PPP.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's a great addition, Sally, but also not quite the format of this session. So we'll move on with Joel and Delia's questions.
Rebecca, Labina, I have a question. We keep hearing about getting forgiveness. Is this something that I, as a business owner, have to apply for? How does this work?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, great question. And, you know, when everybody knows for sure, we'll let you know. Okay. But there is some truth in what I just said. So the process hasn't been laid out, like step 1, you do this, step 2, you do that. We're still waiting on guidance from that. But as Rebecca Goebbels mentioned earlier, this is going to be a bank-to-bank thing. So the best thing you can do is document everything that you use your money for, and then know that we do know that the first step will be to go to your lender to ask for forgiveness. So as soon as your 8 weeks are up, my advice is go ahead and go ask, because for every day after that, you're accruing interest, and we don't know yet if that's interest that you're going to have to pay back because it's past the 8 weeks or whatever. So there's just a lot of unknowns at this point, and so your lender's going to be the person that you go to request the forgiveness. That is definitely step 1. After that, we'll see.
Yeah. So don't be afraid to talk to your banker. That's what I've been encouraging some of my clients, is I feel like they're in this fear zone. I'm like, go talk to your banker. It's fine. You know, they want to understand this as much as you do. So
Bankers are people too.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move into the innovation portion of this segment of this webinar, where we start looking a little bit about what we could be doing differently, either now and in the future. So I have these funds in hand. What should I be doing now? Rebecca Labina.
Well, I'm not sure if I understand the question, but you should be using them for payroll.
Okay.
What?
That's true. That's true. And we've talked about that. So I apologize. That question maybe was not as clear as it seemed on paper to me. But let's elaborate on the document part.
Okay. So I've had a lot of questions about people asking, you know, do people have to show that they timed in and timed out? Are we going to have to show timesheets and time records? And my answer to them is whatever your normal process is for accounting for your employees' time, that is what you're going to do. You don't overcomplicate things. You can pay people when you normally would pay them. You don't have to do new payroll cycles. Just have all of your normal documentation that you would have if you were going to get, whenever you go file your taxes at the end of the year for your business, that's the same documentation you're going to want. So if you paid utility bills with it, you're going to need the bill and show that you paid it. If your list of payroll, who you paid, how much you paid, it's very straightforward. So just don't overcomplicate it.
Just document it all. We better have too much documentation than not enough, correct?
That's true.
But don't make yourself crazy.
Right.
Just Rebecca is making additional Rebecca is making a great point that just do what you usually do to the absolute best of your ability and just focus on things that are strategic rather than process oriented, right? Because what's tempting is to get deep into these weeds, which are important. But the temptation is to live in the weeds, and because that's easier than the deep strategy of what do I do with my business now.
So given that, obviously this all caught us by surprise. Are there any lessons learned that are good recommendations going forward should another crisis, God forbid, happen again, that we should be doing as business owners?
Have a bank and know the human who works there. That I think has been, especially for people of color who own businesses, been a wildly important takeaway from this experience. Because if banking relationship is not something that you have faith in or have had time to develop, then when things come at you fast and financing becomes a need, a lot of people were caught on their back foot, having to then, okay, well, let me meet a banker and let me see if they can help me, ta-da. And so to please be having a bank relationship before you need it, right? It's a little bit like, me being like, hey, Delia, I don't really know you, but you want to help me move on Saturday? That's weird. That's too big an ask for too thin a relationship. And that's really what it's like to walk up to a banker and be like, hey, you don't know me, but can I have 500 grand? That's a big ask for too thin a relationship. And I think that's a big, easy, foundational takeaway structurally for a lot of business owners.
I'd like to add to that I've had a number of clients who did not have any kind of real relationship other than that they have an account somewhere. That's about it. And so when this came around, it was hard for them because they were starting from zero, basically, almost trying to build a relationship at that point. So
it just occurred to me, I have written a couple of articles about bank relationships. I'll go ahead and post those to the Missouri SBDC at UMKC Facebook, so that you guys can, outside of our limited time here, read up about what it would take to build bank relationship and how to make sure it's two-way. Because that's the best kind of relationship, rather than I want to take your money and I give you nothing.
Yeah, there's something to be said to have a local lender available to you, so that when you have questions about the application or this program or any other program that comes along that might be able to help your business, you have somebody that you can pick up the phone, a live person who knows you that you can talk to, instead of a bank that doesn't have live people that you're allowed to talk to when things like this happen.
So in preparation for an audit, which is probably going to come in some form at some point, would you say that's correct? Audit?
No.
No?
The IRS.
That's the fear of a lot of people, but not based in reality.
No, the IRS has been historically underfunded intentionally for 15 years-ish, to the point, now the people who are most likely to get audited are smaller, and but because it's just easier the way that they're now evaluated as good. And so, but considering the number of people who are going to have this money versus the number of people who actually get paid to audit, this is statistically not something that makes sense from a place of data to worry about, but I do understand the fear. There's just not enough agents for regular years, let alone this kerfuffle.
Yeah, there's been some language that's been put out that says if you received over $2 million, that, that might be when you might want to get concerned about if there could be a potential for an audit. But the reality is what Rebecca said, and if you are no more likely to get audited because you took the PPP funds than if you didn't take the PPP funds, because there's random audits all the time, no matter what.
Well, that's a ray of sunshine in all of this.
Can you do that again, Rebecca? I like that. We'll do it together. Oh.
So, Anya, do you have a question before I move on to the engaged portion?
Well, I've had some that have had not a very good, pleasant experience with their bankers during this process, and now are questioning whether or not they should go somewhere else. Is it just because of the change of information, the chaos, the demand, being unprepared? Should they give these bankers an opportunity to just, hey, we've all had a rough time, give us another chance? Or should they be shopping around for another bank?
I think that will depend upon what kind of experience they actually had. If it was just because their banker didn't feel comfortable with doing the program, or their banker didn't feel comfortable, you know, and they moved a little slower, but they were still friendly, had good customer service, that kind of thing, that's a little bit different than someone who you couldn't get a hold of, wasn't polite to you, things like that. So I think it would depend on the actual experience. What would you say, Rebecca?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Do keep in mind that every bank in America suddenly became a snake trying to swallow a grapefruit. And imagine if you ran a restaurant and you suddenly got 1,000 orders in a day, and your usual amount of orders was 100. Now, granted, to keep the scale right, it'd be more like 1,000. But you know, just or 10,000. But so there a certain amount of grace is called for. But if you had an experience that felt personal rather than structural, then that might be another lens to look at as to whether or not it makes sense to move. But next question, move to where? Who's doing non-PPP loans right now? If you have other funds to transfer and this kind of thing, do you really want to go through the hassle of changing every single thing that comes in and out of your checking accounts? Because anywhere you move is going to demand those deposit accounts. Just make sure it was like an actual egregious experience, and that you have someplace to go, because the banking community is also trying to figure out what the new normal is. And so like, oh, well, the old normal was I could just go get another bank at a drop of a hat. Yeah, but this ain't that.
I want to acknowledge that 30 minutes goes by really fast, and that there are lots of questions that have not been answered. But the goal is for us to give you just enough to have more questions and to know where to turn to find out more information. So in the last segment here, and just the last minute or two that we have, I want to talk about engagement. You can contact us at the Missouri SBDC here in Kansas City. You go to our website and you just go to the contact form. If you don't already have a relationship with one of the coaches here, you can just start by filling out the contact form at sbdcumkc.edu. If you're in Rebecca's area, neck of the woods, Rebecca, tell us, what is your neck of the woods, Rebecca Labina?
So I am the northwest tip of Missouri. So that includes Nottoway, Atchison, Holt, Andrew, Buchanan County, Clinton, and DeKalb.
So do you have a recommendation on the same thing with the contact us spot? Is that a good place for people to start?
Yes, that's perfect. That's my website right there. Northwest Missouri State University is my host.
And you'll see, oh, looky there, Rebecca Labina, Regional Director, and there's an email, and you can reach out to her there. And then Delia.
I'm legit.
Reach Delia both through the Missouri SBDC as well as through Missouri PTAC, either one. So Delia, what areas do you serve?
Oh gosh, quite a few. Gosh, I'm just like, I have this huge list that I'm going to show you. See that? So I, in addition to SBDC, I also have some Jackson County areas that I serve, but also with PTAC, I have Northwest, which is up where Rebecca's at doing SBDC. So I am open to anyone who is interested in assistance. Absolutely.
All four of us can help you navigate this.
Yes.
And we can get you connected to resources. I recommend that you stay tuned to KC SourceLink. You'll see right at the top of the page, KC SourceLink is our partner in this webinar. And you'll see right there, stay informed with frequently updated resources. So there you will find an ongoing updated list of resources, classes, funding, a little bit of everything is available through there. So I encourage you to take advantage of that. Don't hesitate to reach out to one of us. And we'll be covering probably more of this topic as time goes on. Next week on Better Together Tuesdays, we'll be talking about unemployment part 2, because we already covered unemployment once and we had so many questions that we decided we need to revisit it. And of course, a lot has changed since the first time we had the conversation. So I want to encourage you to return next Tuesday. Thanks to our friends at KC SourceLink for partnering with us. Thank you to the Rebeccas for being with us today. And thank you to Delia being my co-host.
Thank you, everyone.
We're going to continue to try to keep business simple even in complex times. I hope to see you again next Tuesday. Bye, everybody.